Can you believe we're now only 5 days away from the Switch 2 blowout on April 2nd? Crazy, isn't it?
It's crazy. It really felt like it was happening so slow and then all of a sudden happening so fast.
Right? It just snuck up on us somehow, even though we've been waiting for years at this point. But here it is, just about. And of course, I got two of the foremost Nintendo experts to talk with me about today's topic, being Switch 2 accessories. Will there be anything there on April 2nd? What do we think there could possibly be? But since these two are such well-known members of the Nintendo community, I also want to get their general thoughts on it too. So we're going to talk about accessories first, and we'll touch on Kit Krysta's general thoughts afterward. And I don't know if I forgot to mention your name. We have, Kit Krysta here. So,
yes.
By the way, I'm looking back at our past discussion. I believe it was just over 3 years ago, which means, did you guys just have your 3rd anniversary on your channel?
We did, and we remember that we spoke with you very soon after we left Nintendo. That was one of the first things that we did afterwards, so glad to be back.
Yeah, it's good to have you. And I can't wait to talk more about, our expectations for this Nintendo event here. So, again, congrats on the 3rd anniversary. And with that, let's get to it. So, we're starting off with, what do we think Nintendo is going to do in regards to accessories on the Switch 2? Especially because, well, two things. One, Nintendo does have an affinity for making all kinds of weird stuff for their systems, whether it was a crossbow zapper thing on Wii, or steering wheels on Wii and Switch, Ring Fit, of course. But the thing is, though, as far as we know, most of those accessories, and not all of them, that were made for the Switch won't be compatible on Switch 2 because of the Joy-Con's physical size changing. So I guess I want to start off with a kind of simple question before getting to what we think they could make. Do you think we will see any kind of accessories from Nintendo for the Switch 2 at the April 2nd event?
I'm not sure that they'll necessarily be in the video itself, but there's always other things that happen kind of in the periphery of the video itself. So something that I'm personally very interested to find out more about is a new Pro Controller. I basically play exclusively on a Pro Controller. I love that controller. I would be glad to just continue using that, but if they have some new iteration of that I would have my eyes all over that.
Yeah, I feel like some of the more basic accessories, like a Pro Controller, or something that's a little bit more one-to-one with, this is how you can play a game, an existing game or a new Switch 2 game. That's probably more likely, but some of these more zany accessories that you're talking about, is there a new Ring Fit adventure coming out for Switch 2 and they've improved that, that ring or something like that? Those things I feel like would be probably not at the April 2nd.
Right.
In that direct or at that event, the hands-on event, but maybe later in the Switch 2 life cycle. But yeah, you're totally right. I think we're in for a fun generation, just in the Switch 2 generation. I'm sure we're going to get tons of weirdo, accessories and peripherals and things like that for Switch 2. So while it might not be right on April 2nd, I think we'll definitely see it throughout the generation of the console.
And as we've been gearing up for the April 2nd Direct, we've been realizing they have so much information to convey because they've been so tight-lipped over the run-up to this. They have to prioritize what they can talk about and what they need to handle later, or what they can handle at some sort of event that's happening, or through some other sort of communication. And I think that the peripheral conversation maybe doesn't make the cut in comparison to some of the other higher priority things that they have to talk about. And to the point that Krysta was just making, obviously there's the first party side of this story, but I'm interested in the third party side, and that's where we get to see stuff get real zany and weird. Krysta picked up a Nintendo Switch toaster to hold game cards. That's one of my favorite ones, and I think once we learn more about the functionality of the Switch, maybe the mouse functionality of the Joy-Con, there could be a whole new cottage industry of nonsense around things like that, and I'm here for it.
That is a great point. Yeah, these are basically they're almost new accessories in and of themselves, being able to use the Joy-Con in a whole new way. But while I've been playing around, I have actually a 3D printed mock-up of the Switch 2 here, right? So I've been playing around with the idea of using this as a mouse. I'm this actually feels pretty good, but still not as ergonomic as an actual mouse. And yeah, I imagine there could be a whole lot of accessories that aim to bridge that gap between the two. So you guys brought up the fact that, well, actually a couple things here. in case anyone doesn't realize, you both used to work at Nintendo, so you have some pretty good insight into how Nintendo likes to position things. And based on what you're saying, it sounds like having more beyond the basics, like the Pro Controller, might overcomplicate the message, right, for the April 2nd blowout at least, and the accessories would come later. Is that your kind of general take?
Yeah, I think so, because like Kit was saying, they've been so quiet, and we've really gotten no information,
right?
Other than that very short reveal video, which it didn't have really like details. It just showed us what the Switch 2 looks like, and a little tease of. They didn't even confirm the game, but a little tease of maybe what looks like Mario Kart. So they have been very scant on the information, and I think the things that we do know prior to this big April 2nd event is all from rumors and leaks and patents and just a ton of like unconfirmed sources. So Nintendo has a lot of work to do in terms of confirming certain details, even announcing some new details. There certainly are things that have leaked, and they have themselves teased a little bit, like the mouse functionality, like you're talking about, that's new and novel and different, that they might need to explain to us to get us on board. So yeah, there's just a lot of information they need to get across. And so they're probably going to be very focused on doing that instead of confusing the message for people that are already going to have to be paying attention for a long time to figure out what's going on with this thing.
Yeah, I think they've got three things that they need to convey in this Direct. It's, what is the hardware and what's everything that you can do with that? Games, what are all the games that are coming? And then launch details, like, date, price, launch lineup, all of that. That's a lot to get through, considering where we are now. And again, I'm not saying, we might see somebody holding the new Pro Controller in some sort of a lifestyle video, but again, there's so much that gets nestled away in a press release or somewhere on the press site, or like, we'll confirm this reactively if somebody asks us a question. That's the fun stuff that we always like to look for after the fact, because we know it's hiding there because we used to hide it.
Exactly, right. So I'll be on the lookout to see where they might be hiding that stuff on April 2nd.
Yeah.
So kind of to that point, though, it's interesting because a lot of the Switch 2's reveal so far, or the overall plan for it, seems to mirror a lot of how the Switch 1 went about things. Because we had that early tease, which showed the hardware, same thing here. No actual talking really in either, as I recall. But I did notice or realize, talking about this with you, the key difference, though, is we didn't see the Pro Controller in the Switch 2 reveal, unlike with the Switch 1. Why do you think that is? Why do you think they decided to hold back on it? Do you think it's just because it's more of the same and not that interesting, or because it could be hiding a feature, or is there something else to why they may not have shown it already?
I think similar to what we were saying about how they really need to keep the audience focused on what is new and different about Switch 2. That's what they were trying to do in that reveal video. I think that whole reveal video was really it literally was a Switch 1 transforming into a Switch 2.
Can't be clearer than that.
Exactly. So I think that they're really focused on, the idea that, hey, we recognize that the Switch 2 is sort of an iterative, more of an iterative approach to our hardware. Like, this is not like something that's completely different in terms of the look and the feel. So we really need to communicate to people like what makes this different and what makes this different from Switch 1 so that you'll buy it. And so, maybe showing the Pro Controller, maybe showing some other accessories, kind of straying away from the focus of showing the hardware itself would confuse people. So they're being very mindful about that. So I can see them, really like struggling a little bit with that too, because it does look very similar. And again, everything leaked before that reveal video came out. So they're probably very, kind of dealing with that as well, and a little bit upset about how they kind of lost the element of control. So now it's like, what do we have to do to make sure people really understand the difference between the two and why it's worth it for them to buy it?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and we all now have 8 years or whatever it is with the original Switch. We know what it is, we know what it can do. But back then, this was a new idea, and they had to be a lot more deliberate of showing, yes, it can do this, and it can do this, and here's some of the ways that you're going to be doing all of those things. So I think now there's just an understanding and an assumption of like, all right, yeah, we know kind of the basics of how we're going to be using this. They don't need to spend time on that in their big video.
Right, yeah, and it makes me excited then for, the full blowout on April 2nd, because they don't have to cover all that, fundamental stuff that we already know about the Switch. So hopefully that however long it ends up being, it, ends up being just like, really impactful the entire way as a, we still need to know what that C button does, or the mysterious button on the right Joy-Con, right? So
yeah, we need to know a lot of things.
Yes, we do. And to that point, actually, Kit, you touched on something earlier, actually, when you mentioned the possibility of still being able to use maybe our existing Pro controllers at the least on the next Switch. Do you think that's something Nintendo would actually do? We have seen that before, like with the Wii U supported Wii remotes, but typically it seems like Nintendo loves to just do, give us a reason to buy something new, buy new accessories, buy 4 new controllers or whatever. So yeah, what do you think they might do this time?
For some things, yes. I think some things, no. I think for controllers, Joy-Con Pro controllers, I do think you'll be able to carry those over, and that's a benefit to them because you'll have people being able to have these great multiplayer experiences right away. Maybe the person using the Switch One Joy-Con is analogous to the poor person using the miniature Mad Catz controller for the GameCube 20 years ago. That thing sucked.
Especially like the wireless ones with the IR.
That's what I'm talking
worked.
about. Nope. This thing doesn't work. So I do see a reason. Again, like unless they're using some new technology that completely changes the way that these things connect, I don't see why they would not. Where I draw the line is the dock. I don't think that the original Switch dock is just going to be capable of whatever they're pushing through the Switch 2. So I think that you will need to use that dock, and for the wild people out there who need more, that's probably going to be a pretty penny sort of investment to get multiples of those.
Yeah, I also think that with this discussion that's been big around Switch 2, which is backwards compatibility, it does make sense that some of those controllers would also be backwards compatible, because hopefully that means you can easily transition some of your old Switch stuff over to your Switch 2, and again that's a great incentive for Nintendo. Like, one of their other goals, obviously, is they know Switch 1 was so massively successful, and they have such a huge install base of people still playing and using their Switch 1. It's like they got to transition these people over to Switch 2. So anything they can do to make that transition easier and make it attractive to them. Obviously, they're pushing this backwards compatibility thing pretty big, and I can see that also extending in some respects to accessories as well.
I should say for Joy-Con, I don't think you'll be able to physically attach it to the system. Obviously,
right.
It's bigger. There's no magnets in there. How's that going to work? But in terms of just a loose Joy-Con floating around, you'll need to find some way to charge it, obviously. But yeah, I think they'll still find a way to support that for those big multiplayer gaming sessions.
Yeah, or even those who have Ring Fit, which depends on the original Joy-Con. It would be a shame
right?
You can't use that. Yeah. So yeah, that's a great point actually. Backwards compatibility, I think, almost at the least guarantees you'll be able to use those controllers with existing Switch games. Kind of like how I think the PS5 works. You can use a PS4 controller for the previous games, but you can't use the older controller on the newer games, which is unfortunate. And I really hope, as you were saying, Kit, that they don't go that route this time, that they actually do allow those controllers to work on modern games when applicable. Because yeah, it would suck if Mario Kart's a launch title and you can't buy a controller or can't afford to. It would kind of be unfortunate if you weren't able to play with your friends out of the gate.
There may be some games that require you to use the mouse. Obviously, those would not work. Whatever the C button is, if there's some games that require to use that, obviously not. But I think for the vast majority of games, it just makes sense to let people use those for a multiplayer setting.
Yeah, especially with that message that Nintendo's always been out there saying of like multiplayer out of the box was a big thing for them, and if they're going to launch with like a multiplayer title like Mario Kart, it would be very odd for them not to let you use your old controllers. That'd just be weird, I think, for them to do that.
I really don't want to relive the days of the early days of the Wii, and by early I mean like the first 2 years of the Wii, where I could not find a controller anywhere. Like I had all these multiplayer games, I could not play any of them because except for Wii Sports, because you could use the same controller. But yeah, that was hard to find anything back in those days.
Yeah, that was a bummer. It's not fun.
Yeah, it was. All right, I want to expand the conversation a little bit now because we've talked about what will likely be there on April 2nd, likely just the Joy-Cons and Pro Controllers themselves, but who knows with Nintendo. But thinking a little bit broader now, what else do you think Nintendo may end up making for this? Do you have any like crazy ideas or iterations of existing accessories? Actually, it just occurred to me, there is one possible accessory they could announce here, perhaps, that wouldn't come out of the box or Wii U wouldn't need out of the gate, but with Mario Kart 9 being there and being possibly a launch title, or wherever the next Mario Kart is, maybe they would have the wheels available early on, the ones you plug your Joy-Cons into. But do you have any other thoughts or on anything?
Here come the dual screens. Just kidding.
I want that!
I was waiting for somebody to go there.
I have to bring it up because I just think it's just such a wild idea. Because, okay, so if for those who don't know, there is 2 USB-C ports on a Switch 2, one on the top and one on the bottom. And I had stupidly made a very, passing comment about, this is stupid. Why do we need 2 USB ports? And I got schooled by people that were like, you don't know anything. You can add another screen to the top. The accessories are endless. Possibilities are endless. And so there have been all these mock-ups floating around of potentially having kind of another screen that could attach to the top of the Switch 2 via that USB-C port, and then you can have potentially a DS, 3DS kind of experience. And, we were talking about a lot leading up to this is that, Switch 1 has such a great benefit of being able to port all those Wii U games over that made the lineup for Switch 1 so great. But Switch 2 won't really have that luxury, so maybe there is something there around, did Nintendo figure out a way to port over these 3DS, DS games? That library is massive, so yeah. Could this be an accessory? It's kind of a wild card, but I just like to talk about it because it's funny.
I do really want to know, though, in the January video, they lingered in the overview over that top USB-C port, and I really want to know why. That's an interesting detail for them to linger on in that first video. Could be a bit of a tease, so I do want them to answer that question. It's very mundane, but something else that I wanted to bring up is the additional storage. So I think everybody said that they're using the micro SD Express, which is kind of like a new version of SD cards. Right. When I search around for these, I need to do some research. They don't seem to be as plentiful out there as just normal, micro SD cards. Maybe this is like a big brain move, get one in advance, because I don't know if these are going to be in short supply or what. I just need to have one of those because I'm expecting to carry over a huge number of Switch 1 games that I just need on there from day one.
Yeah, no, I hear that. That's a great one. And Nintendo has had their own, branded, at least officially licensed SD cards before, so maybe they'll have those available at launch. But whether they're in short supply or not, who knows? And also, I want everyone to use these faster SD cards because that also leads to faster loading in online games. And I don't want to be lingering there on the Mario Kart screen waiting for someone's slow SD card to finally pop into level.
It's good for all of us. I do wonder if they'll upsell you though, because they like to do that with their branded stuff. So maybe the big brain move is to get a normal non-branded one now before it completely runs out everywhere, and then you have to be forced to buy the really expensive Nintendo branded one.
But you're telling me this one with Bowser on it won't run faster than the others?
Oh, it definitely will.
I'm gonna buy one of these right when we finish recording before this video comes out. Maybe I'm gonna hoard these. I'm gonna be scalping SD cards.
You here become a scalper. This could be a new video series on Kit Krysta.
Yeah. In terms of stuff that they could do maybe down the line, so we need to know what this mouse functionality is and how widespread it's used in games. I do wonder, could they just release something that's literally a mouse, where it's this game is built around this functionality, you're going to be doing it for a long time, so instead of holding this very narrow thing, we've made something that has a more ergonomic form factor, because for this game, that's all that you're going to be doing. We had the Mario Paint mouse all those years ago, and hey, that's something you could potentially plug into the top of a Switch. Why not?
And sorry, go ahead, Krista, did you have something?
I was going to say, we never saw the Joy-Con grip, which is the one that makes your Joy-Con look like a doggy, on the Switch 1. I wonder, again, on Kit's point about this, now we're getting real zany, on Kit's point about this mouse, maybe there's a way to attach the 2 Joy-Cons together to make kind of a wider mouse situation.
Oh, that's interesting.
Where it's a little bit more ergonomic because it is kind of thin. If you hold it,
right.
Down like this, it is a little bit not like uncomfortable for your hand. Maybe there's a way to
The magnets.
The magnets are the key, everyone. Some sort of grip
That'd be crazy.
Would expand, use 2 Joy-Con, but make it into 1 mouse.
That's actually a smart idea. Yeah. And also, speaking of it being ergonomic too, like, you mentioned Mario Paint on the SNES, and that came with a mouse pad as well. And it makes me wonder if they would release an official mouse pad or something so you can use it, more easily when you're not at a desk, which I imagine most people won't be, like in your lap even or something.
Everything is leading towards the true killer app AAA release, which is Microsoft Excel Nintendo Switch 2 edition.
That's what the secret C button's for. It pops up the paper clip.
Exactly. You won't believe these macros that you'll be doing on this Excel.
Clippy is Clippy for Smash.
That'll be amazing, actually. So since we are talking about the mouse, because it is a major part, even if it's not a separate accessory, like it is a big new component of the Switch, seemingly. Could also be something they just forget about, like with the IR pointer on the current Joy-Cons. But what are your, not to branch too off the core topic, but what are your hopes that they do with this mouse too? Like, do you have any ideas in mind for what you'd want to see them use it for? Or, what are your general expectations?
I'm so interested in this, and I feel like that the most interesting part for this mouse conversation is that the spectrum for how cool this thing is really wide. Like, on the very low end, it could be really lame, like feel the ice cubes in the Joy-Con lame, and you see it in one game.
Yep.
And then you never see it again. It's like, oh, that's cool technology. That's neat that you put it in, but the application of it was like kind of nothing, right?
Right.
Or it could be like on the other side of the spectrum, like, Nintendo invented the D-pad. It's like, we have changed the way you play video games. Like now this control scheme is like the new way we all play video games. Wow. Like we didn't see that coming. So that's why I'm really excited to see more about this. I feel like they have to show us like very practical applications of if there is a mouse, like how it all works and how it functions in a game. But the spectrum is so broad that it could land anywhere on it, and I think that's really cool.
I'm really excited for it too, but I'm curious about like how practical it is to use. Like if I'm just sitting on a couch or all these different scenarios where people are playing. Obviously, if you're playing a PC game, you're sitting at a desk. But the good news is they are having these hands-on events that start pretty much right after. So we will start to get some like from real people impressions, hopefully, of like how this thing works. Obviously, Nintendo is going to set up the ideal environment for you to do it, but as far as like just getting a gauge on like, is this something that I can reasonably use for a long time or comfortably or in these different settings, we should start to get information on that pretty soon.
Yeah, those are great points. Yeah, it makes me, it does make me wonder, like, if they haven't fully cracked being able to use it in many situations, like, will Nintendo even fully embrace it themselves, or will it be just an optional input when you can play in any number of ways? And for me, this is the most exciting thing about the Switch 2 because it is something different, but at the same time, it's like, it's a very old technology, like they were doing it in 92 on the SNES, as you were saying. But I hope that does open the door to, more freeing experiences, like, bringing more PC games or those interfaces at least over. Mario Maker obviously would benefit greatly from this. I almost couldn't stand it on Switch 2 because of the lost functionality from Switch 1, but I think having a mouse feature would really be a game changer there. And I don't know.
Yeah, Mario Maker 2 was kind of a bummer because it felt like a bit of a step back. And again, like Krysta said, she's so right about, there's such a range of how this could be. It could be like, draw your icon on your cart in Mario Kart. But like, imagine if they made like a really significant new game that was entirely based around that control interface. Like, right. I won't shut up lately. I keep talking about a Splatoon MOBA. I think there's like such cool ideas around a Splatoon MOBA, and like if that was controlled by mouse and that was just an entirely new paradigm shift, then we're talking about, D-pad, analog stick, motion, and we're back on the mouse as far as the Nintendo great control innovations. But we'll have to see it before we put it on that Mount Rushmore yet.
I want to circle back real quick to that USB port you brought up, Kit, I believe, or Chris, but I think both of you brought it up, because it's funny, because like USB ports like inherently aren't that exciting. But when it comes to the Switch, it kind of is, because why would you add a second if they didn't have some ideas for it in mind, right? And, if it's in the form of a second screen, that'd be amazing. But is there anything else we can picture them using that for? Beyond
C
just
is
plugging
for
in
camera.
There we go. You think you'd go back to the camera?
It's like the Game Boy camera all over again.
I want
like
that.
4K.
Hold on. I've got it right here.
There you go.
Yep.
There you go. I mean, you could attach a camera to the top of
You
that
could.
Switch. You could press the C button and turn that camera on. You could have a Splatoon MOBA game and you can see your little face with your friends as you play. I don't know. Could be some fun, like little live streaming. I don't know. It could be kind of neat. If it was
some sort of a
camera.
little microphone that becomes the new We Speak. Like, just imagine any peripheral that you could just pop into the top of that thing. They must have some plan for it, though. They would not linger over it in that shot if they didn't.
Yeah. It would be such a Nintendo thing to have the microphone and camera be completely independent devices.
Yeah, totally. I mean, remember on the 3DS, it was that there was a microphone that you could like. This is how we get Nintendogs for Switch 2. You got to need a microphone. You got to talk to the dog. There's got to be some way to do that. Blow into that microphone. I remember that was a thing that we were doing on a 3DS, which was weird. So I don't know. They're zany, so they could have some weird accessory for that top USB-C port for sure.
Krista and I did famously once do a business meeting through the Wii U video chat. And it was the first and last time that we ever did that, because it was a bad experience. But again, Nintendo never likes to let an idea go away.
True.
They might be like, oh, we can bring. Oh, now we have the ability to bring that back, and we can do all these other things. Draw the Reggie and Mr. Iwata video where he's putting Mr. Iwata in a heart. I love that moment.
Oh, it's so
on the
cute.
screen. It's adorable.
So good.
Who knows?
Yeah, it's so funny, but it's so easy to forget the Wii U, had a camera built in as well. I was only reminded of this myself when I revisited Nintendo Land recently, and they use that for the mini games. Whoever has a gamepad, you're looking straight up their nostrils sometimes.
It's like a weirdly bad perspective.
Exactly.
Zombie U is back for Switch 2.
But yeah, with a Switch 2, with you, using it as an actual handheld, it would make a lot more sense there, I think.
Yeah.
So that'd be fun if they actually do bring back some more, camera-based interactions. Maybe bring back that weird WarioWare game on DSi, where you use your head movements or whatever to control the game. So, yeah, I do like, at sometimes wacky Nintendo goes a little too far, but on the other hand, like I appreciate that about Nintendo, that they always do this weird stuff, that you wouldn't quite expect, and hopefully we'll see some of that on Switch too. So, is there anything else? Oh, sorry.
We have seen this trend too with iterative Nintendo devices, like DS to DSi, for example.
Right.
Is when they like go from one to one that's also kind of similar. They do like to add a lot of like weird lifestyle-y things to it. So DS to DSi, when we did that transition, it became like DSi became like, oh, you can also use it, like an MP4 player. You can, or MP3 player. You can use the camera. You can, use all these other functionality that's not based around video games. So they could be thinking along those lines for Switch to Switch 2. It's like Switch 1 did a really good job letting you play your games, and we had some great games on the system. But Switch 2 will also give you all these great games, and you can use it for all these other things. That's something that they've definitely done in the past. So,
right, definitely. Are there any other accessory thoughts you guys have before we move on to general thoughts on the Switch 2 presentation?
Well, I do think we'll eventually get either a new Ring Fit game or something else in the realm of exercise. It's just something that they just seem, interested in from a long-term perspective. And Ring Fit was such a big hit, but I would be surprised if that's something that we're seeing like immediately out of the gate, as in next week.
I need Ring Fit 2. I really enjoyed the first one.
Yeah.
I think I remember you guys commenting on some of my tweets. Like I was, doing daily updates for a while about losing weight through Ring Fit. Like it's like for me, it's a far superior option than Wii Fit ever was. And it's sold. I think it's still in the top 10 selling games or among them. Like it's sold really well.
Yeah.
Yeah,
you
so it'd be silly.
got swole on Ring
that's
Fit.
right, yeah.
Like literally. It was amazing. Yeah, it's really cool.
No, because it did something that no other game really had, including Wii Fit. It actually made exercise fun while still being exercise focused, So I really hope that they do expand on that, and maybe they'll try something else new with it. So I would love to see what their plans are. But speaking of plans, let's go ahead and broaden even further now. I want to talk about, since we have you both here and your great insights into Nintendo, I want to find out more about just your general expectations. Obviously, you'll be posting your own predictions on your own channel, so we don't need to dive into everything. But before we get into any specific ideas or hopes you may have, I'm curious, from your experience working at Nintendo, how crazy is it internally, do you think, right now it is? Like, we're we're less than a week away, days away from the event at this point. How insane is it?
Oh, it's bad. People keep asking me, like, don't you wish you were there working on this launch? I'm like, no. So not want to be there right now. My heart goes out to the team that is dealing with all of this. This is just, it's worse than Switch 1, honestly, because with Switch 1, we were like all so ready to get off of the downer that was Wii U. We were like excited because it's like, finally we can get out of these doldrums. We're like so excited to get into Switch 1. We can easily like wash our hands of the old thing because no one cared about the old thing.
Right.
But it's still different. This time it's like everyone cares about the old thing. The old thing made, 75 mil, whatever. Like the install base for the old thing is like crazy. So it's such a difficult challenge for the teams to like walk that tightrope, and the pressure is so on. Like they're feeling pressure from everywhere. I can only imagine the stress that they're under. It's not fun for them at all. So I feel bad.
Yeah, and something that we just have seen happen again and again is like when you have something that's a hit and then you have the next iteration of that, the goal is always to outdo the one that just happened. But sometimes you can't do that. Sometimes there is just a peak to something. So when you're talking about, oh my gosh, we've been tasked with creating a system that's going to do even better than the Switch, or oh my gosh, we're going to be a new Mario Kart game that has to do better than Mario Kart 8 Deluxe. That's just like a really daunting and exhausting proposition. So again, we have a lot of sympathy for the teams who are going to be going through that. I have no doubt that the Switch 2 is going to be a big success and people are going to love it, but I do think that's going to be kind of a storyline throughout this generation, is like the constant comparison, like didn't quite measure up to the original Switch.
Right.
Whether that's internal or external, it's just natural that kind of conversation happens.
Yeah, that's a great point. And also because, looking at patterns, Nintendo historically, every successor does a little bit less than the previous one, if not a lot less.
Or sometimes a lot less.
Sometimes a lot less.
And it's only when they completely reinvent themselves that they, regain that momentum or even surpass their previous, highs. So it'll be interesting to see what happens with the Switch 2, because it's such a genius idea, on the one hand, it'd be stupid to throw that away, but on the other, it is iterative, and I think, in a sense, their biggest competitor for Switch 2 is Switch 1. It's going to be the more affordable option. There's tons of games out of it, 8 years, 8 years worth of a library, probably even more so if they continue to support it into the future. So, it'll be interesting to see, what happens here and what the conversation actually ends up being.
And we've seen them over the last couple of years kind of scale back on what we would say are some of the more routine marketing activities that they would do, where it's like, hey, this thing's selling gangbusters. We don't need to go to these lengths. Right. I'll give you an example. The last time Doug Bowser did a media interview was like 2 years ago. And you have to imagine that come next week, he's going to need to get out there and talk to some people. They're going to need to start, rev that machine up. And It's hard when you're starting from zero, as opposed to, I do these regularly, I have the reps in, I feel comfortable. I can just, that's a whole other thing that we think so much about, this process of coaching the team back into shape to do these sorts of things that they just kind of put on the back burner for the last couple of years, because they're going to need to turn up the heat.
Yeah, that's really interesting. I hadn't thought about that. Yeah, because this is, especially with this being the longest gap between Nintendo systems, I think, ever. Especially with there being no handheld exclusive option to fall back on. So yeah, they're going to really have to be firing all cylinders, and not just on April 2nd, but also beyond that. And,
right. Imagine if it was like, all right, you have to take a 2-year break from making videos, and then when you come back, it's the most important video you've ever made in your life.
Oh my God! Yeah, that'd be a ton of pressure.
You'd be a little nervous.
I would be extremely nervous. Yeah, you're right. Yeah. Good. That's a great analogy. Dear God. So it's gonna be really. Oh, go ahead, Krysta, please.
I was gonna say, and in terms of like Nintendo's mindset too, like they've been so successful, right, with Switch 1. They haven't really had to work that hard to get people to buy it, and to they didn't really have to work hard to communicate what makes Switch 1 special. Everybody kind of knew that from the start, bought into it for 8 years, continued buying for 8 years, made them a lot of money. But now they really have to do that work. And honestly, like, we were at Nintendo in sort of the height of the Switch 2 era, or I'm sorry, the Switch 1 era. Nintendo got a little bit, they had a little hubris. They were like, we're awesome. And they were, but it's a long way down from that top of that mountain. And if you're not prepared, someone is coming up right behind you. So I feel like they need to like snap back into action, like get their mental state back into like fighting shape as well, and just really like start to think differently about how they're going to market their stuff, how they're going to talk about Switch 2, because they haven't had to do that for a really long time and they're out of practice. So yeah, I'm really interested to see how they will like take this transition, because it might take them a little time to like get their footing again. And they might learn some hard lessons about, oh wait, this is not as easy as it once was.
Your mountain analogy reminded me of the Price is Right game with the little climber guy going over the mountain. And he falls off if you go over, and I'm like, there's a long way to fall down.
It's a long way to the bottom.
And it's
true.
Nintendo was lucky in that during the Switch era, they were basically the only ones. Like, we have Steam Deck now, but that's a very kind of niche device. But now, going into the Switch 2, like, we were hearing rumblings of the other platform holders now experimenting with their own systems. So Nintendo may not have the market to themselves entirely this time. And if they fumble at all, well, they could be there to pick up the bag.
Yeah, everybody wants a taste of this now. And frankly, I'm surprised it took this long for the rest of the industry to kind of get to this point. Like we saw with motion on the Wii. Remember how fast we got the Kinect and the PlayStation Move and all of those copycat things. And this is much, much longer. And I do still think that the Switch 2 will be at the top of all of those by probably a pretty significant margin. But yeah, people now have more options. And it's like, if I want the flexibility of something that maybe has more power, or something that can pull, if Nintendo is not the platform that I'm most invested in, you can get a Steam Deck or something else that can play a wider range of games, maybe at a higher quality. So yeah, it's just a little bit harder this time.
And price plays a big part of that conversation too. Nintendo has typically been the more affordable option out of the other gaming options that you have. And this one might be pretty expensive in terms of a Switch product or a Nintendo product. So it's sort of going to affect their footing as well. It's like, usually, if anything, they can say like, well, if you want to play all these great games, we are your cheapest option to do that. But this might not be the case anymore. And now with other, like you were saying, with other companies out there making something similar, if the price point is also similar, they will have less to differentiate themselves and more competition.
Right. Yeah, and we've even seen Sony has even started doing a little bit of this light handheld business again with the PlayStation Portal, which is relatively affordable and lets you play these amazing looking games from, I believe, anywhere you have a connection, or maybe it's only I think it's whenever you're at home or on Wi-Fi, I believe, right?
Krista has one.
I have one, yeah. And I absolutely love it. And
there we go.
I'm not ashamed to say that, like in the months kind of this year leading up to Switch 2 stuff, my Switch 1 has gathered so much dust, and guess what I've been playing? My Portal. And
Astrobot?
Astrobot. I mean, any PS5 game, I usually just play on my Portal now, and that's the point though. It's like there are other options now for people to put their attention on if you don't have stuff going on yours. So like when things were not happening on Switch 1, I had another option. So that could very easily happen with Switch 2 too, if they don't have constantly, a great, library of games coming to Switch 2, if they don't have the thing that makes the Switch 2 really interesting and unique that makes you want to play it. Like there are other options out there now that you can play and you can enjoy. So and that was not the case during the Switch 1 era. So that's another challenge for them to overcome.
Definitely. Well, to kind of wind down here, I want to talk about the Switch 2 event in general now on April 2nd again. And I guess I figured I'd just ask each of you for maybe one expectation you have of the event. It could be whatever. It could be a specific product that you think will appear, or a mindset, or whatever, like a manner in which they present these things. And then what hope you have as well. Like, what is your hope that you really want to see here, whether or not it's, whether or not it's likely to happen or not. So let's go start off with you, Krysta. What's an expectation you have and the hope?
I think the expectation that I have is that they will satisfy all of our questions. I think, like we were saying at the beginning of this, we have so many questions. There are so many questions that they still need to answer about what makes Switch 2 different from Switch 1. What makes Switch 2 something that I want to buy day one. Right. I think they will very clearly address that. And in that presentation, I do think that they will have, for anyone that's watching it, that's interested, they will have one or two things that will check your box and say, like, yes, you've answered my question. I'm buying this day one. So I do think they'll successfully do that. And I'm really excited to see it. I think that they have, they definitely have a lot of big announcements coming, and it's gonna be great. I think a hope that I have is I do, I know this is iterative. I know they're in like a post Mr. Iwata Reggie era, but I would love them to be a little bit zany again. Like, yeah. I miss fun, weird Nintendo. Like, I know that they did so well with Switch, and they were very buttoned up with Switch. We lived through them becoming very like proper and buttoned up and kind of straightforward in the way that they do things. But I'm here for it. Give me like a fun accessory. Give me just inject some fun and whimsy into this thing. Like, I would love to see a developer that like, comes out and acts like a human for once. I mean, it'd be just great to see some stuff like that from Nintendo, because we haven't gotten that for so long now, because they've just really tightened up with Switch 1.
Yeah, it actually does make me nostalgic for some of the Wii U era with like those crazy presentations, which are really fun and charming. But
yeah, exactly.
How about you, Kit? What are your hopes or expectations and hopes?
I think for an expectation, I think this is going to be a Nintendo Direct that's pretty unlike those that we typically get. Like, if there was ever one to really go all out, break the bank, spend some money on, do some different things with, I think maybe this might be more akin to some of the older E3 digital events in terms of the overall production value, and just make it feel like, oh my gosh, you have to watch this thing. It in itself is a show. And then as far as a hope, I do hope that they can recreate that kind of first year packed release schedule that we saw with the original Switch. That was like such an incredible feat of planning and development, and it just gave the system such an incredible foundation. Like, we all knew that we were set for success when we saw the first year release schedule. So I think if they can outline like, hey, here's a great launch lineup, but here's also the stuff that's coming in the first year that you can expect, they are in the fast lane and off to the races again, and they can have another hit product.
Yeah, that's a great way of putting it. Like, I look back at the Switch's first year, I'm like, wow, that was actually amazing. Like, and I think that's still the Switch's singular best year that they've had. And I suppose in the case of Switch 2, I hope that we have other really good years as well. But yeah, the first year in particular, I hope is especially strong, because that's really what's gonna kind of set the tone for the entire system's lifespan. And it's so important to get that right, as early as possible. So, all right, well, thank you so much, Kit and Krysta, for joining me today to talk about all kinds of things related to the Switch 2 event on April 2nd. But if people want to hear more about from you, in case they somehow don't already know, where can they follow you both at?
Yeah, we're Kit and Krysta on pretty much every platform, but we have a weekly podcast that comes out on our YouTube channel, and we also been doing tons of Switch 2 videos. This is our first Nintendo launch that we're celebrating and enjoying outside of the company, and it's been so fun to like do predictions with everybody else and get excited for Nintendo Directs and like look at the zany patents and like think about like, oh, what could they be thinking? So we've been having the best time celebrating that with our community. And if you want to support us, we're also on patreon.com/KitandKrysta.
Perfect. Do you have anything to add there, Kit, or did we cover it?
She said it.
All right, great. I will add links to all that in the description below. Check it out. I'm a big fan of what you guys do over there on Kit Krysta and the Kit Krysta podcast, so definitely give them a watch. Otherwise, thank you so much for joining me, Kit Krysta, and everyone else on our continuing countdown to April 2nd. Stay tuned tomorrow for a new topic and new guests as we talk even more about Switch 2. With that, we'll catch you later. Bye, everyone.